And we are live. Welcome to the wonderful author, Robin Newman. How are you, Robin?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a great honor and great privilege. I'm just going to remind myself to say that this is the children's literature channel of the New Books Network, which I am fortunate to host. My name is Mel Rosenberg, and I am lucky to have the award-winning multi-book author, Robin Newman, straight from somewhere at the end of Long Island, some end of Long Island. And I'm here near Tel Aviv in Israel. And the wonders of the modern world that we can talk as if we're in the same room. So, Robin, welcome to this show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
And we are kind of siblings now.
Yes, we are. So very fortunate to be represented by the Liar to the Royce agency, which is Liza Fleissig and Ginger Harris's amazing agency. And I love them both. They're incredible. And I would not be a published author today if it weren't for the two of them. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm delighted to join with wonderful people like you. And actually, because of wonderful authors that they represent that I interviewed, I think maybe the connection with Liza started, and it's a wonderful connection. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later because you have such similar backgrounds, you and Liza and Ginger, coming from the legal profession, and abandoning it all for children's books. So, but we are here to celebrate. So, Mazel Tov. You have a brand new book out, a wonderful book. Wave it all around and be very proud of it. Who's writing this story? Talk about your book, and Creston published it, right?
Yes, Creston Books.
And the wonderful illustrator and the editor.
Deborah Zemke. Yeah, she's amazing. And so who's writing the story is a fractured fairy tale about a writer who's having problems with her characters, namely the big bad wolf and the three little pigs. And they have the writer wants to tell one version of the story. Of course, the characters want to tell a different version of the story. And while they do that, the story sort of introduces the basic elements of story in terms of character, setting, plot, conflict and resolution. I thought it would be a good primer for those for teaching kids about basic story elements, and that's sort of how the story evolved. And well, first, it started. I think it was around the pandemic, and I was actually going through a really bad phase, and everything I was working on really wasn't working, and that happens to writers. And it's you've got good writing periods and bad writing periods, and during the pandemic was not my better time. So I, after eating quite a bit of coffee chip ice cream, and I'm pretty sure I put on 20 pounds during the pandemic, being miserable. I finally closed my computer and I went back to some of my old stories, and I had this fractured fairy tale about a writer having problems with her characters. And I, at some point, I don't even remember, like, I felt like it needed the hook, and it was basically the primer story elements. And once I kept on reworking it, and eventually I showed the manuscript to Marissa Moss, who's my incredible, amazing editor at Creston Books. And little by little, she was able to help me get it into shape. And that's what this is. And yay.
So it just launched the beginning of May. And read us a little bit, show us some of the wonderful illustrations.
Sure. So this is the opening, and it's once upon a time, there were three little pigs. The first pig, who wasn't very smart, quickly built her house out of straw. In one piggly wiggly minute. Who's writing this story? Asked the first pig. Where's the writer? Right here. Why? What's the matter, pig number one? Actually, my name is Professor Pigsley, and you have my character all wrong. I'm crazy smart, and a crazy smart pig would never build a straw house. Then what kind of house would you build? Asked the writer. Professor Pigsley thought for a minute. Yeah, then she began to calculate. She added and subtracted. She divided and multiplied. And she quickly turned her calculations into a plan and her plan into a picture. And so that's the beginning of how, of who's writing this story. And
So we don't want to give it away because we want everybody to go out and buy it. It is a wonderful book. It works on so many levels, which is one of the things I like about picture books is that they're multi-leveled and adults and kids can each draw their reactions and the way they react and associate with the book. And you've done that so well. You've opened it up for so many levels here. How did you well, because you didn't have to pick this particular children's story. You didn't have to pick these particular three pigs and the wolf who wants to be a nice guy. So where did the characters really come from?
well,
Who's Miss Piggly Wiggly, Professor?
well, I've always had a very huge fondness for the Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf. I would love to honestly just sit down, have coffee with them. But I've always loved these kinds of stories. And I think that fairy tale in particular, everybody knows it. So it makes it very, especially if you're writing a picture book and a fractured fairy tale, if you just say someone is big and bad, everyone knows who you're talking about. So you don't need a lot of, character description. It's sort of built into just those two words. And it makes it much easier for a writer to work on that kind of story. So that's, yeah, that's sort of how it sort of evolved. And I grew up in France for a number of years. And so the Big Bad Wolf and the Three Little Pigs are tons of stories. Some of my favorite stories are involve those characters, and whether or not with the pigs and the wolf or just the wolf, it's just, the wolf, being the quintessential bad guy, who wants to eat whatever critters in the woods. And so you just like have a lot of material to work with. And so that's and I was also a French major in college. French, well, I started off at some point I was a Romance language major with French and Spanish, but I realized I did my junior year abroad in Strasbourg, France. And of course, I'm probably since I was a little behind, I started Spanish much too late. That's really what it came down to. And I'm totally digressing, but while I did my junior year abroad, one thing that I took a Spanish class. Of course, everybody should take a Spanish class while they're in France, naturally. And but I took a class on Borges, and we spent an entire year on Jorge Luis Borges, and one entire year on his book Ficciones. And he's very, in terms of like what he does, and he's constantly challenging the reader. It's one of those things like you never know what side is up, where you think the story is going. It never goes that way. And it sort of left a lasting impression on me. And and those kinds of, all those influences when you're reading literature, even though I write for children, they somehow, come back to you. And so I really do like writing stories where it's just, where you can really, question like, question where the characters are, and have the characters like actually question the writer's role, that kind of thing. So and have a little pushback. Yeah.
So what is special about this book? Because it's special. First of all, you have a voice. I love the voice. Of course, this voice is the animal's voice, but between you and me, you wrote the book. Don't tell anybody. It wasn't the piggies and the wolf. So you have this special voice, which kind of borders on snarky, which I love. I love snarky characters for little young kids. We call them chutzpah. I don't know what you call them in America, but these an attitude. So your characters all have an attitude, and of course there's other books on fractured fairy tales. But what I found really unique about this book is they sit down and explain to the reader how books are supposed to be put together. and what's behind the book in terms of the characters and the setting and the arc. And it turns into a kind of cute lesson on for children and adults on what books really are. And I found that really super clever.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And I love that the fact that well, I guess it sort of gives it away, but I love that they kill off the writer at the end. It just and yeah, I know why not, but that's the power of characters, and it's the power of writing. It can take any kind of direction, and you never know what direction it's going to take. So it just
well, I can tell you from personal experience that very often when we write a story, we do die. The death of an author is really something that sometimes happens. The moment the book comes out and people start to review it, and nothing they say has anything to do with the real reason that you wrote it. Kids make different interpretations, and that's the sign when you are kind of separate from the book, when you're kind of dead to the book, then the book takes flight. And that's another analogy because you have an airplane there. But this book takes flight, and you do lose the author. So the notion of death of an author is very literal in your story. Who needs the author?
I know.
God, you're out of here.
Yeah, finito.
So a wonderful book, and a few words about the author and about your love affair with Creston Books and the editor.
Marissa Moss is a genius. There's just no other word to describe her. She's brilliant. She's a genius. Aside from Liza and Ginger taking a chance on me, Marissa Moss also took a chance on me too. And I am so grateful to her because of those three amazing women. I am a published author. And if it hadn't been for them, it never would have happened. And yeah, I just and it started off with my first book, which I happen to have here, The Case of the Missing Carrot Cake. And this book, I actually have the original version of it. Was this little book over here, and I bring it to school visits because I really want kids to see what it's like. And during one of the holidays, this was a gift from my niece and nephew, Isabel and Cedric. And during one of the holidays, Isabel was opening up her presents, and she started to yawn. And I noticed that she was also the first grandchild. So we bombarded her with like so many presents. I mean, it would look like a toy store. And she actually started yawning because she had too many gifts, but also too many gifts that didn't really mean a lot to her. And so the following year, I did these little books for all my nieces and nephews. And this little book here, which is handwritten, and really, it's probably not a good story, and it's messy, and it's got smudges. And this tiny little book, after 8 years of rewrites, eventually became this book here. And
fantastic.
So it just yeah, it only took 8 years. And
eight years is what it takes.
It took 8 years. Yeah,
it takes 8 years.
It took 8 years of rewrites. And yeah, originally the characters, they were monkeys, and I brought the first manuscript to my writing group, and nobody liked the monkeys, so I ditched the monkeys pretty quickly.
You're a serial ditcher. No?
I know. It's like if
have characters work, in your book. Who needs the main character? You're out.
If it doesn't work, try something else. That's really what you have to do. And it just yeah. So, and then at some point, I don't know when it dawned on me, but I love the idea of having the mice be the detectives on a farm. And also, I love the idea that the mice were the smallest animals on the farm, being the enforcers of justice. And so, yeah, and I always liked it. And of course, everyone said, there were already a number of mouse detective books. I won't mention the Geronimo, yeah, everyone kept on saying there's not enough room in the market for another mouse, but I'm like, why not? It just
I don't buy that stuff.
Yeah, neither do I. It just and
I just interviewed an author that has a dinosaur book that did
mhm,
very well. And people would say, "Oh, another dinosaur book. We have 10,000 dinosaurs."
I
But
know.
if the book is good and then mice are cute, then who cares?
That was my thought, and they're not the same characters, it's just you're gonna develop your character very differently from another detective, they're
Robin, we talked about this at the preamble. We're all writing the same stories. We're fracturing the same fairy tales.
exactly.
I have a story like yours where a house ends up on a skyscraper, and we use very often the same structures, the same tropes, but we all tell different stories.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, they're all variations of the same thing. And it's just how you spin it, it's just that's going to make it unique and
Eh,
different.
You've done really well. I keep saying this. One manuscript in 3 or 5 thousand gets a publishing deal, and you're multi-published, and your books are so well loved. Let's now go back to your story, and you have an interesting story, Robin. And
Well,
yeah, I mean, because just another sentence, because you could have done many other things in your life, and you write for young kids. What's that all about?
I started off as an attorney and I was really
No,
miserable.
no. We're going back to the age of zero, dear. I'm not letting
Zero.
you off that hook.
And I'm trying to think. Let's see. I grew up both in France and New York.
Pourquoi?
And,
Pourquoi?
because of my parents' work, and which was actually very fortunate. Although at the time it didn't really feel like I was being very fortunate. Yeah, so I lived in Paris. I lived in Normandy for a year or two, and then my parents, because of their extremely long divorce, we went back and forth for a number of years. And ultimately, we ended up settling in New York. And my dad stayed in France for a number of years, and then he came back to New York as well. So I've always had that bicultural experience, which I'm very grateful for now. Um, it was a lot of upheaval, and it was very unsettling, I think, at the time, because it was when we were in France. Oh, I also happen to have a twin sister, by the way, and
I know that.
and
Who's
uh,
who's
so
in the same business?
she is in the same business. We do.
What, an identical twin or a twin twin?
She is an identical twin. So if you happen to bump into Hillary, or if you happen to see someone who looks like me and doesn't say hello, you can just assume it's my sister. and um, and yeah, and I'm very close. I also happen to have a stepsister, and the three of us are extremely close. And but I'm also very grateful for my twin sister, because having done all that back and forth between the States and France, it was very helpful to have a buddy, along for the ride, so to speak. But yeah, it was hard. It was because when we were in France, we were in French schools, and when we were in the States, we were for the most part in bilingual programs, but sometimes we weren't. And things were very different, even things like doing division in France, it's very different. We went from metrics to to feet, and it just really it took a while to really get figure out which language we were really speaking and focused on. And also I think language wise with twins too, they're also they're usually some kind of language delays at some point, but add in that bilingual factor, it was a little challenging. And finally, we settled in the States by fifth grade, and that was and I'm very grateful for that. But it took a bit of time to and yeah, so that's and then we were in English from fifth grade on. We were in American schools, which was just very grateful for the stability.
So Robin, I didn't know this about your past, but I have this theory that we write to the children's writers write to their child and to the angst of their childhood. You write for children between the ages of, let's say, 5 and 11, something like that. So is that the young Robin that you're trying to communicate with, or?
No, it just I've always liked those books. I mean, they're the ones that I always remember from when I was a child. I mean, they really influenced me. I mean, yeah, I've always loved picture books, and very fortunate that there are a number of amazing French picture books out there. And I mean, I grew up with Madeline, and
Oh,
and
my favorite.
I love Madeline, and
In a house in Paris,
I
all
know.
covered with
My sister
vines,
and I used to,
with 12
run
little
down the
girls
street screaming,
in
"We
two
want our
split
appendix
homes.
out too!" It's just
One
and
thing, because this is the first time that I have a real Madeline lover on the show.
oh really? Oh wow! And
What is the best line from that book?
I think it's the very ending, which I don't know, but oh, it's like 4 or 5 lines. It's the last paragraph of the book, and I wish I knew it by heart. But it's and I can see it
So you
visually.
think about it. Thank God you are well. Now please go to
Go
sleep,
to
said Miss
sleep, something
Clavel.
like that.
But okay,
Yeah.
my favorite is when she's in the hospital and there's a crack on the ceiling that had the habit of
Mhm.
sometimes looking like a rabbit.
Oh, interesting.
And
Yeah.
I think that outside of Lewis Carroll,
Yeah.
that's sheer genius.
Yeah.
We grew up on the same things.
Yeah. And
I'm going to still stick by my theory that you and I write to our child, because we could be doing so many other things. And essentially, you went on to study to be a lawyer,
I
not a
did.
children's book writer.
No, I actually I was petrified of writing, actually, surprisingly, not which is really funny. I always thought I was the worst writer in the world. And when I was in college, I went to a women's college and with brilliant women, and I was very insecure, and so I always thought I was the admissions mistake, and it just, but that's that's my perception of it. And so I became a French major because I figured like I could avoid having to do anything with English. But of course, like being a French major, all you're doing is analyzing French text. So it's very funny. And yeah, I majored in French and minored in political science, and then went off to law school. And the thing that I actually really enjoyed about law school was the writing, surprisingly. I don't think I really would have appreciated the writing if I hadn't
So
gone to law.
until then, you were kind of averse to writing. I mean, you
I
love picture
was
books.
totally. And I felt very insecure about writing. But my first year in law school, I got the book award for research and writing just by some fluke, and I just loved it. And I think I was also, before I went to law school, I was a paralegal for 4 years, and I think that was really very helpful in terms of setting the stage, learning how the library worked. It just, I spent a lot of time in the library. And then I went to a public interest law school, and I had hoped to have a career doing public interest law, but the year that I graduated, there were federal and state cuts and budgets, and it was just not something that was going to happen. And I was carrying some student debt, and so I took the first job that I could find, and I ended up doing workers' comp cases. And some people thrive in that environment. They're doing administrative hearings. They love it. They're basically in court all the time, and I could not stand it. Just and then one day, during my lunch break, I called my mom, and I'm like, what should I do? And she's like, quit, we'll figure it out. I called my dad. He's like, don't you dare quit without another job. And for once I listened to my mom, and then she was great. And she had a friend of hers who taught family law at Cardoza, and also had a family law practice, and it was great. So I did some grunt work for him, and he bought me time till I eventually got a job as a legal editor. And the projects I did for him actually helped me get my job as a legal editor. And while I was a legal editor, that's when I also did a lot more writing, and I actually really enjoyed it. And then it was when my son was born that I decided to go freelance, and that was around the time also my twin sister, who at the time was with John Wiley Publishing, they they sponsored, I think, some of there's a program, there's symphony.
Okay, so your identical twin sister, who had the same childhood that you did, between and betwixt, did not become a lawyer. She went straight into publishing.
No. She was her big interest was photography, and so she got an MFA in photography, and ultimately used that to become a photo editor. And then she sort of shifted gears a little bit, and she deals now with rights and permissions, with dealing with
So you've crossed paths.
Right. And so we crossed paths, but very differently, but very similar interests, but different interests, kind of thing. And yeah, and eventually, yeah.
But did you have one moment where you said, "Oh my goodness, I can write. I should write children's books"?
No. So Hillary, my twin sister, she was at Wiley, and they sponsored they sponsored the Selected Shorts program at Symphony Space, which is a competition for that provides competition for writers. And if you win these competitions, you have famous actor read your stories. So I started writing little short stories. I kept on entering, and I kept on losing, and then at some point there was I did the book for Isabel and Cedric. And I think at some point around that time, also my husband suggested, why don't you take a writing class? And I'm like, yeah, maybe that's not a bad idea. And I took, there's the JCC on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, they offered a children's fiction class. I'm like, great, I'm going to take it. And then the day before I was supposed to, to start, they called up, they didn't have enough students registered. I'm like, oh, okay. So then I signed up for a course with Gotham, and that just changed everything. As soon as I walked in the classroom, like I knew I had found my people. And then, and that by that point, my son was born, and I started freelancing with the legal editing because I wanted to be at home a little more. And then the writing just sort of just catapulted, and the Gotham fiction writing class was just fantastic, and it really was a good intro. It was a primer on like the business of children's publishing, and it was also a primer on like what a picture book is, what's middle grade, what's YA, and it was just fantastic. So that's sort of how I fell into it, in that big rambling mess of a.
So you wrote stories. Critique group, SCBWI, how did you find Eliza and Ginger? I call them the literary angels.
Yeah, so I was really lucky. So a former client of Liza's, I met through one of the SCBWI conferences. We ended up just like taking a train. We went to the Princeton, it was at Princeton that year, the New Jersey SCBWI. And while we were on the way back, I met this woman, and she was talking. And then a couple of months later, she managed to get an agent. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And so she introduced me to Liza, and we went back and forth a lot. And it wasn't until till the New Jersey SCBWI annual that I actually got to really sit down with Liza, and that's when she agreed to take me on as a client. And
you had such similar backgrounds.
Well, the lawyer thing, yeah. Yes.
The lawyer thing. I'm thinking that if you want to be a children's writer, well, you should study law, but I mean, it doesn't appear that there's any relationship, but there is.
Well, lawyers are writers, that's
Yeah.
what, and
Well,
in my critique group, there were a number of lawyers. So it's just,
I have a daughter who's a wonderful lawyer, and one of the things that I learned is that when you go to law school, you learn about humanity.
well,
So,
that is true too. And but lawyers are storytellers, that's really what they do. When they present their side of a case, when they're working on an affidavit, it's your client's story, and that's what it is. So
these gloves are too small.
yeah.
So I'm going to venture. See, you just hit a real note in my heart, because I was a scientist for I don't know 30, 35 years, and scientists are also storytellers. They bridle when you say this. If you tell a lawyer that they're a storyteller, they say, of course, yeah, we tell our stories. But scientists, no, we don't tell stories. We tell the facts. We tell things that we all tell stories. Scientists also tell stories, the good ones. So this is really, I think everybody tells stories. So what happened? So you teamed up with Liza and Ginger, and then what happened?
Gee whiz. It's yeah, so it was the case of the missing carrot cake. And at some point she brought it to Marissa, and Marissa made me do a whole bunch of revisions. And I remember it was a Sunday night, and Liza called me, and Marissa said yes. And that was, the game changer. Just yeah. And then there are two other books.
So how long did it take from when you said, I'm going to take this seriously, and when you started your Gotham class, to getting the yes from Marissa?
I think it was I guess that was around like the 7-year mark, that I've been doing this. And
it takes 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, maybe six to seven. And yeah, it takes time, and you have to be patient, which I'm not very patient. And
who's patient? What's patient?
I know. It just and but yeah, it just it's just been an amazing ride.
So since then, you've had several whodunits, and wonderful picture books. I'm a picture book fan, of course, so don't call me fuzzy butt. Wait, I'm thinking hundreds of people, including me, have probably sent Sleeping Bear books about bears. And you said Sleeping Bear, a book about a sleeping bear, and they published it. That's like 1 in a million. I love it.
Just knock on wood, just luck,
It's
it's
not
funny.
luck. It's not luck.
Well, it feels like some of it is, it's just, I had the book was originally titled Bear Said a Bad Word, and inspired by my son, Noah, who came home one day from school. I think he was second, third grade, and he was in a horrible mood, said a whole bunch of things he shouldn't have said. And that's where it started. And so the story, one thing I'd like to mention, I'm very lucky. I'm a member of the Bank Street Writers Lab, which is an amazing critique group. It's been around since 1937. And we meet on the second Tuesday of the month. And as I believe they have always done. And at the original meetings, by the way, they used to serve sherry and all that, but it just, but not anymore. And since the pandemic, unfortunately, we've been virtual, but it just, but the lab was incredible in terms of helping me get this book into shape as well. And so when I had the manuscript, Bear Said a Bad Word, I wasn't getting a lot of feedback on the book. People liked it, but it wasn't, yeah, nobody was buying it. And then one of the members of the lab said, you need to change the title. And at some point, somebody came up with Fuzzy Butt. And as soon as the Fuzzy Butt, the title was changed, I think it was like a week or so after that, the book sold. So it was just a simple change. The text didn't change. It was just the change in the title. So it just.
let's talk about your illustrators.
I've been very fortunate. And Deborah Zemke has done most of my books, and she's
a well-known author in her own right.
yes, and she's done all the detective.
I should interview her.
Oh, you should. She's wonderful, and
you will connect us.
Yes, absolutely. And she's incredible and amazing, and I love working with her. She sees things in the manuscript that I don't see, and she also picks up my mistakes. And if I miss a beat, or she just knows. Maybe it's because like we've been working together for so long, and we have a project that hasn't been announced yet, but that's going to be coming out fall 2025. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And
you can announce it right now if you want to.
I can't. It's not yet, but
okay.
But we're going to be.
I'm an interviewer. I'm always looking for scoops. You know?
But
oh my goodness, did I say that?
How did that happen? I know. Yeah, so I'm thrilled we're working on another book together, and it's a little different, and so but yeah, no, she's amazing and wonderful, and just so creative and talented, and the word amazing comes up every time, but that's who she is. And yeah, so I've been very fortunate to work with Deborah. I've also worked on 2 books with Chris Ewald. He did Hildy Bitterpickles Needs Her Sleep, and the illustrations are incredible. He also did my Peacocks book, and then the incredible Susan Buttori illustrated Fuzzy Butt. And yeah.
So usually what is the process of choosing the illustrator? Do you get to, because you're now multi-published, you get to have your 2 cents worth, or do they say, oh, Robin, here's your illustrator?
The publisher really has complete control, and the publisher and the editor. But I've always been asked my opinion. But every time I've always suggested folks, and they've always come back with people other than the ones I've suggested, but their suggestions have been perfect. So it's just the editor just knows. And so I've been just so fortunate, because it's really the illustrations that sell the books, certainly for this age group, and very, very fortunate to have such talented illustrators working on my books, or on our books. It's a team effort. And also, I'd like to shout out the designer on the books. Also has they've all been so great. Simon Stahl is the designer who works for Creston, and he is just so talented. And I'm always been amazed at what he comes up with. And with the detectives, I mean, he came up with the whole idea of having them look like files, like investigative files. And he always has a lot of fun with, the copyright information and the copyright page. And that's just pure talent, so yeah.
And so people they talk about luck, and I guess there is always a certain amount of luck involved. But when the opportunity presents itself, you have to have really, really lovely manuscripts. And one of the things that I see, like going back to the I'm going to get this wrong, Fuzzy Butt. Did I get it right?
It's fine. Yeah, don't call me Fuzzy Butt.
Yeah, it's the hilarity, and this is something that you do so well, of the juxtaposition. That you have this bear that just wants to go schlafen, as the Jews say, and a woodpecker.
The real estate developer, I know.
The real estate developer.
Yeah, since I have and Hildy Bitterpickles, there's also a real estate developer. I think it's just because I'm from New York, and real estate is such a big thing in New York, and even in Paris too. It's such a big thing, and I've always been slightly obsessed with it. So it's just why not?
Absolutely. So we're nearing the end of this wonderful interview, and I'm really in awe of your talent and your career. You know, we could say to people, okay, well, the way to succeed like Robin is to you know, grow up in two different cultures and and be able to overcome all of the uneven things of growing up in a tangled family with a identical twin. But we all have our own paths and our own difficulties and our own challenges. Beyond that, what is your best advice for being the 1 in 1,000 or the 1 in 5,000 authors that succeed?
Hard work. It's just you can't give up. Join the SCBWI if you're a children's writer. It's really the union. They can help you, you know, find an editor, find a critique group, find an agent. The SCBWI is just the organization to join, and also the local chapter for your SCBWI. Yeah, and persistence. It's just, you know, it's just so much of the business is very subjective, and you just need to, you need to get your manuscript or your illustrations in front of the right editor. That's really what it is. And finding, you know, some of it's luck, you know, some of it's, I do think luck.
Robin, there's always luck.
There's always luck, but I think luck, you know, being in the right place at the right time, I think a lot of that does come into play. And you know,
Well, to get lucky, you have to work hard.
Right,
and
right.
you have to knock on a lot of doors.
You cannot, and also be very open to changes. You know, if an editor tells you to do something, they know what they're doing. The word that you should say, yes, of course, I will change it. You know, it just, if you feel extremely strongly about something and you don't think it's right, you know, that's a different story. But for the 99% of the time, if your editor is telling you to do something, they know what they're doing, listen to them. It's their experience.
But did you ever have an oy vey moment when an editor tells you this isn't working, and then you say, oh, yes, yes, of course, I'll work on it, and you go home with this terribly empty feeling in your stomach? You know, I've almost sold this manuscript, and now I might never fix that.
Yeah, and I've had that a lot. And it just, and it's disheartening, and it's not what we want to hear. It's never what we want to hear.
But it's what we have to hear.
But it's what you have to hear. And it's, you know, it's part of the business, and it's part of being a writer. You know, it's just you know, you know, that's where, you know, those pints of ice cream come in, and you know, you wallow in your sorrows, and but then you move on and you look at another. See, that's the nice thing about working for my age group, is that, like, I work on a number of projects at the same time. So if one isn't working, you can put it aside, go back to something else, and see if that your juices get flowing and there's something better. Yeah, that's just par for the course. And nobody likes rejection, and it's tough, and it's unpleasant. But I think it's at some level, without the rejection, you know, you wouldn't appreciate the successes as much, and because it makes those successes so much more meaningful. So, at least in my opinion.
And we didn't talk even about your work for hire with Sesame Street. And there's stuff we didn't touch on, which means that I'll have to have you back when your book comes out. When your book comes out next year.
Sure. Fall 2025. So stay tuned. And
for those newbies in the Liza Royce agency like me, we can only hope and aspire to the kind of success that you've had and the other people that I've interviewed on the show. As they say, as the Jews say, we should be so lucky. But beyond that, beyond the lucky, Robin, I've been privileged to read your work, and it's wonderful. And your new book, now's the time to flash it again for everybody to see. Who's writing this story? It works on so many levels. It's funny, it's engaging, it teaches, and you also have wonderful teaching material on your website. So I have a lot to learn from you. And I plan to.
Right.
I plan so Robin Newman, it's been great having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations
Thank you.
on your new book. And I'm delighted now to join you as your as a what's the word? A sibling, an agency sibling. I'm not a
Yes.
colleague yet. I'm not a colleague yet. I'm a
No, you are a
colleague.
colleague.
I'm a colleague in waiting.
Yeah. You're
So I've been
right.
here.
As a writer, you are a colleague. Yeah, period.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thank you. You're a very kind and generous person. And I've been here with the wonderful Robin Newman. So you get to go like this because you're
Okay.
Robin Newman.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a special treat for me.
And for me too. I'm really honored to be interviewing you. My name, before I forget, is Mel Rosenberg, and I am the host of the Children's Literature Channel for the New Books Network. And this has been another wonderful episode. And Robin, I'm so happy you agreed to be on the show.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Stay safe and happy and work hard.